Amanda, do you think the government will sort of be hit hard, I guess, by questions as well, sort of picking up on what Chris said about the fact that those comments were made earlier in the week by the ambassador, and at the time, they were not rejected by the Prime Minister. There were no consequences. And then when he reiterated them Friday after that apology, then all of a sudden he was fired.
Yeah, and I think certainly we're already seeing heading into question period that these are going to be the questions that will dominate probably today and over the next few days. But I think the challenge really for the government is how do you maintain in this highly sensitive time frame? It's like a pressure cooker situation. How do you maintain this diplomacy and this rise above it? And that was really the problem with former Ambassador John McCallum, is to speak so freely and candidly at a time when every word that's uttered on this issue has such a sensitive underlying outcome attached to it that you really have to be careful. Words matter. Words really matter. And I think it became obvious that after, the first comments that were made, it was clear that he just hadn't understood that you couldn't continue to speak so candidly, so vocally, and particularly when it appears that he's both offside and unhelpful during this particular time. The Prime Minister had no recourse but to ask for the resignation at that point. I think anybody would agree. And I do think that they're in this particularly difficult situation where the former ambassador for his entire tenure, both as ambassador and as a member of parliament, has a lovely legacy to leave. So I think they're trying to give him that as a send-off on the way out, while still acknowledging that he simply could not do what he did.
I just want to quickly remind our viewers that we are waiting for question period in the new House of Commons to begin. We're here with the Power Panel discussing some of the big political issues of the day, but while we're broadcasting on TV, we're also online on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And we're going to be taking your questions about whatever kind of questions you have, I guess, about this upcoming sitting, the direction of the parties and their policies heading into the election. And the Power Panel will be answering as many of those questions as possible. So you can send them in on Twitter to at PNPCBC. That's our handle there. We have a CBC Politics Facebook page. And as well, we have a CBC News YouTube page. And you can leave us your question on any of that. Tim, when we're looking forward towards the next few days, this issue is obviously still very pressing. These two Canadians are still detained. We've seen some of the reaction in China so far, very, highly reactive to the firing of Ambassador McCallum. What are you looking for going forward?
Well, you're going to see, I know what the opposition are going to do, and the government are going to try and fight back on this, but the government is now going to make, the opposition is now going to make this in more detail about Justin Trudeau's choice. And what did Justin Trudeau do in putting John McCallum there? All the promise, all the enthusiasm of what Mr. McCallum was going to do comes back now and bites the Prime Minister. Why did he let him stay after the first series of comments? I think people will be looking on this particular issue as to who comes in next. When do they come in and what approach do they take? I was just going to say, one Chinese Canadian political scientist today, expert in that area, I should say, talking about, well, maybe you put in somebody like Jean Chrétien, who's a good relationship.
Like an envoy.
Yeah, I think the Prime Minister needs now to find a win out of this, or at least stop the bleeding. Is that a route?
And they're in a jam. They have to do it quickly. We've got two people who are, being held. There is no trade relationship, economic relationship that comes above the safety of these Canadians. I think that parties of all stripes would agree with that. And so they have to get someone in there quickly. But the challenge is the diplomatic process moves at a snail's pace. So, listen, the snow will be melted in frigid Ottawa before we probably actually have an ambassador placed and their diplomatic papers presented and officially operating. So, yes, to Tim's point, Guy Saint-Jacques, a former ambassador to China from Canada, mentioned this morning on The Current on another CBC show, actually, the idea of maybe we need an interim envoy, this idea of appointing a former prime minister to quickly escalate things and say the safety of these Canadians.
And we should mention also that there are reports of a third Canadian being detained. And Chrystia Freeland was asked about that, and she said that they don't have the specifics, they don't have any information on it yet, but when they do, they would share that with Canadians.
Yeah, just to go back to the point here, this relationship between Xi Jinping, who's the president of China, and Justin Trudeau started off famously very well in Antalya at the G20 summit. He spoke, President Xi, about the relationship between the two countries that have been really predicated by Pierre Elliott Trudeau, where he took the courage to visit and to begin normalizing relations with China far before anybody else would. So that was a pretty high note. And now it's descended to this point where not only are we not going to have a free trade deal, that didn't go the way we planned, where tourism is now and investment is beginning to dry up in this country. You have to wonder how you put that back on the right stage. So the points that have already been made, perhaps putting somebody who is visible to China, knows China, that would be something you could put in even on an interim basis while you look for a long-term replacement.
Amanda, I thought it was interesting that the Minister Freeland was asked, you know, how might this affect the relationship going forward, and specifically around Mr. Kovrig and Mr. Spaver, and will it have a negative, something along the lines of will it have a negative impact? And she said that no, absolutely, we will be able to mend fences. What did you think of that?
I thought I took note of that as well, and she wasn't ready to concede this relationship. She was, and as we remember, the Harper government didn't have a relationship with China. There was no relationship to leverage. There was no China policy. And you're right, this did start off on a positive note. So I think what you saw from her was this expression of optimism that there would be a positive outcome, that she did expect that the relationship could expand and potentially flourish in the future. I think the government also has to kind of work on communicating to Canadians all the work that's been done behind the scenes as it relates to the detained Canadians. So the fact that they've been rallying from kind of a leadership standpoint on the foreign stage, on the global stage, rallying leaders, some of our biggest allies, France and the US, the UK, Australia, to come to the table, 144 more diplomats and academics to call for and support Canada. I think it's important as we're heading into the Parliament resuming that the Prime Minister, that the government puts out this message that they are able, from a leadership standpoint, to rally this kind of support, that the global community is on side with Canada.
But this idea of sort of going back to trying to have a good relationship with China, Tim, I feel like there's a lot of Canadians who are looking at this saying, wow, these two people were detained in retaliation. Like, that's a crazy thing. And we're just going to try and make sure the trading relationship, there are questions, I think, from Canadians about pursuing that relationship. And to Amanda's point, yes, successive governments have had trouble articulating the exact policy position they want to take on China, but no government is immune to that.
No government, but there has certainly been a step backwards, and there's going to have to be a recalibration now. I don't think Canadians would react well either if we suddenly if we got the two Michaels released, if we suddenly embraced China forcefully and fully. I think there's a cooling off period, if nothing else, that is needed here. But the focus has to be on these two, if not three, Canadians that are there. And I think it's important that the Prime Minister, if he wants to seize an opportunity, is going to have to seize that opportunity and say, look, this is a different China that I'm dealing with than what I saw 2 or 3 years ago. This is not something that's acceptable to me. It's not acceptable to Canada. I am saying, hold off. Let's wait. Let's get this figured out and move forward.
To use the Liberals' own favorite measuring tool, that being the deliverology system, this weird internal tool they use to measure their promises, they would be getting a failing grade on this, because they came into power saying, trade is the most important, tourism, more tourists from China, more was the quote from McCallum, and now they're in this position where they've bungled the file, and more than that, in terms of the general population to Canadians, we have to put the primacy on the safety of those two individuals.
Two priorities: securing the release of those two Canadians, and then the Huawei decision, whether they're going to be allowed to participate in the 5G mobile network. Already some of our Five Eyes partners, New Zealand, Australia, United States, have said no. That decision will also have a bearing, although we did have Lynette Ong on the House. She was also on your show, and she said, look, you can't make political decisions based on commercial results or the other way around. So she doesn't think maybe it's as big an issue as some others do, but clearly as another potential irritant in this relationship.
And a reminder, we're just waiting for question period now, but we are going to be taking your questions after question period through YouTube, Twitter @PNPCBC, or on a CBC Politics Facebook page. We want to know all your questions about how you think the sitting will proceed, what kind of challenges the parties might face, what priorities they have heading into the election, and our esteemed power panel will be here to answer as many questions as we can get to. So please send them in. Amanda, why don't I head back to you and get a check-in on what you're looking for in question period. We saw a bit of signaling yesterday from the Conservative Party, which held caucus over the weekend here in Ottawa, that they'll be talking about life being more expensive under this government, or getting more expensive if you were to re-elect this government. What do you make of that?
Right, and what we saw was like these flat out lies. This like taking a page from the Rob Ford playbook or from the Trump playbook. If we just say it, then it must be true. Hopefully people will report it and they'll have to comment on it. The reality is that 90% of Canadians are doing better than they were before, doing better than they were under the Harper government. This government is going to have to spend a lot of time talking about the record, talking about the Canada Child Benefit, talking about the dollars that are in pockets. And they're going to have to pose some questions back to Andrew Scheer. They're going to have to ask, what is your plan? What is your plan for the economy? What would you cut? What are the things? And we're seeing it in Ontario, with the dissembling of healthcare and education under Rob Ford. So, under Doug Ford. So the idea of like, how are you going to turn this around, this dialogue, these falsehoods that the Conservatives continue to put out into the pages, turn it around as a positive to be able to talk about your record and make it stick?
And we've got the little box there, if you can see our viewers at home. We just saw the new MP for Leeds-Grenville, Michael Barrett, who replaced Gord Brown, who unfortunately passed away getting introduced with the leader of the Conservative Party, Andrew Scheer. I think we're actually about to take you live there again because questions are beginning.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear that the Prime Minister's foreign policy is a disaster and Canadians are paying for his mistakes. Our international partners have no respect for this Prime Minister, and why should they? After clowning around in India and inviting a convicted terrorist along with him, he then was forced to take concession after concession from Donald Trump. He even angered our partners in Japan and Australia. And now we have the debacle with China. Why did the Prime Minister show such weakness and wait so long to fire his ambassador?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to answering the member's questions shortly, but I think before we do, we need to take a moment to recognize and applaud the extraordinary women and men who worked so hard to build this beautiful chamber for us to serve in, and to remember that if we who serve Canadians in this place work even half as hard as they worked to build this place for us, we will be very well served as a country indeed.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's foreign policy is a catastrophe, and Canadians are paying for his mistakes. A terrorist who was found guilty was invited to India. American steel and aluminum tariffs are still in place. The Prime Minister has insulted our allies in Japan and Syria, and now we've got this crisis with China. When will the Prime Minister stop making Canadians pay for his mistakes? Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are working with integrity and firmness to ensure Canadians' safety and to ensure the liberation of the two Canadians who were arbitrarily detained in China. We're also going to be aiming for clemency for the third person who's detained. Then we're also going to ensure that we're there and standing up for the rule of law, for the independence of our judiciary, and to speak with our allies all around the world to ensure that everyone understands that Canada will always defend the rule of law. Mr. Speaker, for the Prime Minister, money is the least of his concerns. He's never had to make a budget for himself, and so it's not surprising that he thinks the budgets balance themselves. All that he knows how to do is to get deeper and deeper into debt. And who has to pay for it? Canadians. Mr. Speaker, when will this Prime Minister finally tell the truth and admit that because of his mistakes, he will cause taxes to be increased? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, our plan was to invest in middle-class people and in our communities. So we reduced taxes for the middle class while asking the wealthiest Canadians to pay more taxes. Canadians, or rather, we have created 800 million new jobs. We have excellent economic growth, and we have the lowest unemployment rate in 40 years. We are going to continue to invest in middle-class Canadians, while the Conservatives want to give benefits to the wealthiest because they think that that's how you create economic growth, but they're wrong.
Mr. Speaker, it's not surprising the Prime Minister doesn't worry about Canadians' money. He's never had to worry about money. He's never had to balance a household budget, so he thinks that budgets balance themselves. He thinks he can borrow his way out of debt and that others should pay for his mistakes. So it's no wonder that the debt has grown 3 times more than what he promised. So why won't he tell the truth before the next election, that his wasteful spending and runaway deficits will mean higher taxes for Canadians?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's no surprise that all we get from the Conservatives are warmed over Stephen Harper attacks and an economic plan that failed Canadians for 10 years. They continue to want to give tax breaks to the wealthiest, where we're focused on growing the middle class by investing in people and in their communities. We lowered taxes for the middle class and raised them on the wealthiest 1%. And that has led to not only stronger growth than Stephen Harper ever saw, but it's led to the creation of 800,000 jobs and the lowest unemployment rate in almost over 40 years. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to invest in Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, everything the Prime Minister just said is false. With his changes, the richest Canadians are paying less in tax, and hard-working Canadian families are paying more. And they're going to continue to pay more because government documents show that the carbon tax will rise 6 times higher than what the Prime Minister now admits, which means higher gasoline costs and higher home heating costs. Canadians are already paying for his mistakes, so why is he also covering up the real cost of his carbon tax from Canadians?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We lowered taxes for the middle class, and the only way the Conservatives make those numbers work if they completely ignore a policy they voted against, the Canada Child Benefit. The Canada Child Benefit has made more difference in the lives of hardworking Canadians than any other policy in recent history. They voted against it, and maybe they don't want to talk about it because they plan to take it away from Canadians. Well, we are going to continue to invest in Canadians. When it comes to climate change, it's been 274 days since the member opposite promised a climate plan for Canadians. Where's that plan?
The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-les-Basques. Mr. Speaker, access to housing is a serious problem in Canada. It's a problem for homebuyers who are being shut out of more and more markets. And it's also a problem for low-income renters who are suffering from the shortage of affordable housing and social housing. In BC, for example, there are tent villages that are popping up in places like Maple Ridge, Nanaimo, and Victoria. And this is happening here in Canada in the 21st century. Will the next Liberal budget acknowledge that this is an urgent situation? Will there be immediate investments to alleviate this crisis? Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that Canadians need safe, affordable, and accessible housing. That's why we set up the historic national strategy on housing, which has invested unprecedented sums in housing. It has already helped over 1 million Canadians to find housing. We know there's still a lot of work to be done, and yes, we will continue to invest in Canadians to ensure that we have safe and accessible housing for everyone. The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, that's nice, but 90% of that funding will only be available after 2020, after the next election, and the needs are here now. Over 1.5 million Canadian households urgently need housing. We need new investments now, not in 3 or 4 years. There are solutions that exist. For example, we could stimulate investment by eliminating the federal share of sales tax on newly built affordable housing units. The Liberals should know how this works because they made that same promise in 2015 before they finally let it fall by the wayside. So once again, they will have one last chance with the next federal budget. Will they take action now? Right Honourable Prime Minister. Once again, Mr. Speaker, I'd say that the investments that we've been making over the past several years have been historic, and they've helped over 1 million Canadians find housing, affordable housing. We know that there are still investments that are needed, and there will be more solutions to be set up in the future. But let's admit that the investments that we're making now through the National Housing Strategy are making a big difference in the lives of people.
For New Westminster, Burnaby.
Just last week, media reports said that 46% of all Canadians are now only $200 away from financial insolvency in a month. But instead of bringing in immediate relief for people facing a housing crisis and crushing personal debt, the Liberals' priority has been to give billions of dollars in corporate giveaways. This Liberal government continues to tell Canadians to wait for real action on housing. Will the Prime Minister commit to making different choices this year? Will he make affordable housing a top priority in this year's budget?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past 3 years, indeed over the past 3 budgets, we made housing a priority for Canadians. We know that it needs to be safe, affordable, and accessible for all Canadians. That's why we move forward with a historic national housing strategy that re-engages the federal government in housing right across the country. And we haven't waited to invest. On the contrary, the significant investments we've already made have helped close to 1 million Canadians access more affordable housing. That is making a real difference now, and yes, many years into the future.
For New Westminster, Burnaby.
You're listening to the first round of the first question period of 2019. I'm Vassy Kapelos, and this is a special extended edition of Power in Politics. We're coming to you on, of course, CBC News Network, but also on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We heard from Andrew Scheer there, the Prime Minister, as well as NDP House Leader Guy Caron. The big issues discussed: China, the firing of Ambassador John McCallum, taxes, and affordable housing. I'm here with the Power panel: Chris Hall, Kathleen Monk, Tim Powers, and Amanda Alvaro. And for about the next 20 minutes or half an hour, we're going to be taking your questions. As I mentioned, you can send them to us on Twitter. Our handle is @PNPCBC, or on the CBC, a lot of CBCs here, Politics Facebook page, or on the CBC News YouTube page. In any event, we've had a bunch already, so we're going to get right to them. I like this one as an opener. Al Crosby asks on Twitter, "All I hear is pointless criticism of other parties. I want to know the direction these parties plan to take Canada on all key issues." Chris, I'll start with you.
Well, I think we just got a hint of that.
A little bit, eh? Yeah.
The NDP talking about the lack of investment in affordable housing. I'm sure we'll hear pharmacare. The idea being that they want to put forward their own ideas about immediate investments that they would make if they were in power in those very areas. And from the Conservatives, taxes are too high. The carbon tax is going to raise the price on everything. And interesting enough, I was surprised by the Prime Minister's response because one has occurred to a lot of us, is that it does sound a lot like a refrain from the 2015 Conservative election campaign. So are the Conservatives coming up with their own plan? We've been waiting a long time to hear what they're going to do on the environment. So if I'm the Conservatives, you've got to start putting forward how life will be more affordable under us, and if we get win the next election, and more importantly, how we can make you feel better about not just your own future, but the future of your kids.
Hey, when Chris said, I wrote down 2015 too. The only person missing is Stephen Harper, though apparently he looms large.
Warmed over Stephen Harper attacks is what the Prime Minister said.
But look at Scheer's attack on the Prime Minister. Prime Minister Harper tried this too. He's the rich kid who knows nothing. Now, maybe the Conservatives figure that they can reinvigorate this argument and use his record to do that. Certainly that's where they're heading. But to Al's question on policy, good luck, Al. You'll see some of it because they will all showcase elements of things they want people to focus on. But they really do believe, they being all parties, that the vast majority of Canadians are going to be looking for key themes. Political watchers of this program and elsewhere will dive deep, but they think they can delimit marketing by focusing on themes, symbols, and appeals. And there's nothing new to that, but it's still what is going to happen in this campaign.
Manuel Michel Jarin Cote on Facebook asks, "Do you think McCallum spoke the truth, and should Canada continue playing politics over Meng Wanzhou?" That's a question from Facebook. That did come up, Kathleen, during question period as well. It was the first question from Andrew Scheer. Basically, why didn't you fire him sooner?
Yeah, so Manuel, yes, I think he probably did speak the truth, but his job is not to do so as a diplomat, right? And therein lies the problem. I think that It's going to continue to be a topic for a number of days. I think China will continue to haunt Trudeau all the way into the campaign, as India has haunted him for 2 years. We saw a litany, actually, of Scheer just opening up the Commons. What that segment actually showed, new digs, same lines, right? Like same attack lines. So you can have a new house,
we'll probably
fancy
steal
new,
that
like
slogan,
still, because he uses catastrophe, a disaster, and he listed all of the concessions on NAFTA, the debacle on China, and I think we're going to see this right into the campaign in October.
Amanda, Manuel on Facebook asks, do you think the NDP will ever form a majority in federal politics? If not, what is their future if Singh doesn't win the by-election and the NDP ends up in third after the election?
So many good questions. Never say never in politics. I will say that. I don't think that this is going to be their election, but I think a lot hinges on what happens in Burnaby South, what will happen with their leader, Jagmeet Singh, if he's able to kind of rally the troops, if some of the fractures that we're seeing within the party, including former leader Tom Mulcair, if he keeps coming out on his attack, it just reveals that there are all of these underlying problems. After Burnaby South, it's going to be whether or not Jagmeet Singh can start to build some momentum, some public profile in a positive way, start to bring pieces of this party back together again, and really illustrate to Canadians what they stand for. Because I think right now, most people are throwing their hands up in the air and saying, what is this party about?
Kathleen, I'll get you to respond to that before I move on.
Well, I mean, the party's got to make its case. And to the earlier question from Al, parties will start putting their platforms out later this spring. We'll see kind of an indication from the federal Liberals in terms of their budget. And then the platforms will come up from the parties in the next few months following that. I think the NDP has a really has to crystallize their focus, right? I can think of tons of ideas that they should be going out. The failed manufacturing policy that the Liberals have actually supervised from 2015 onwards, where we've lost trains, planes, and now almost automobiles in terms of Oshawa, in terms of what they could have actually done to help our economy going. Obviously, they've chosen housing. The New Democrats will be fighting on that affordability issue. But the concern that I have is you see Scheer now adopting language that is really in the New Democratic wheelhouse, which is around affordability, which is about equality, which is how people have been living paycheck to paycheck. And that has always been a winning narrative, is a winning narrative in BC under the Horgan New Democrats, and is one that appeals to many Canadians.
The Lone Knight Chris on YouTube asks, is Maxime Bernier a threat to the Conservatives this year? If not, what is Andrew Scheer's biggest challenge for reclaiming the Prime Minister's office?
The answer is yes. He is a challenge for them. Not so much that he might win seats that the Conservatives would win, but more that he might take enough votes away from Conservatives to allow the Liberals to come up the middle. He has got a natural constituency of people who are from the libertarian bent, who don't see a role for government, who believe taxes are too high. He has really, I think, pushed Andrew Scheer already to take a harder line on people who've been crossing the border and non-border crossings and the costs of trying to house them and these kinds of things. So yes, he's a significant threat, I think, for the Conservatives heading into the election campaign.
I actually think, he's more of a threat to the Conservatives, but he's a threat to the whole system because he's the new disruptor in the system. And as we've seen the impacts of disruption in the United States and the UK, it isn't always pretty. There certainly are a group of Canadians growing by the day, it seems, who are not happy with the status quo. A lot of time, some of them would park with the Green Party or they'd park with the other parties temporarily. Bernier seems to be harvesting that all parties should be concerned about this and concerned about how they proselytize and preach to these people. I agree with Chris. I worry about the Conservatives and the point Chris made, tacking a little too far to the right to pull in a small group of the Bernier tribe. That could have long-term branding impact on them and on the country.
Amanda, Chef Cody on YouTube asks, and this picks up with what we heard during question period quite often, do you think we will get more affordable housing happening before 2020? If so, how are we going to prevent increasing taxes to cover the cost?
Yeah, well, I think that I think we will see this, and the fact that we're seeing it today when Parliament resumes is an emerging focal issue, I think is an important consideration for what we might be talking about over the next couple of months. Affordable housing is affecting so many people, especially in our big cities like Toronto and Vancouver, how just completely unaffordable it is. And I think for an entirely new group of homeowners who are looking to be in that home ownership time in their life, and they're feeling like there's no way that I can get there. There's simply no way, despite good jobs. So everyone is going to need to talk about this. I think the current government's really going to have to talk about the affordable housing strategy, what this looks like, how it's going to roll out, how it's really going to affect people. We can't just talk about big themes and big headlines. We have to distill it down into what does this look like in my life. I think that this is the perfect area, we were talking about it before, for the NDP to really gravitate to. This could be, you know, a signature. They haven't been able to do it so far. I think that they've had a very hard time picking the issues that are going to really matter to them, but this is one that they should probably adopt heading into the next election.
I already made a note to myself, Chef Cody, to check to fact check the 1 million people who have found housing because of the programs the federal government is putting in. I don't know where that number comes from. I'm sure it's based on something, but it's one that seems like a huge number given that the starts on social housing in particular and the budgets and so on, most of it is back-ended over that 10-year project, 10-year lifespan. So we'll see where those numbers come from, but it is going, I agree, it's going to be a really big issue.
But just
Final
to
point,
expand
we'll
on,
head to a break.
Yeah, expanding on affordable housing, we have the big city mayors in town today meeting with the Prime Minister, and they're highlighting what? $123 billion infrastructure deficit. So that is the stuff that people care about, their roads, their bridges, their infrastructure. And I'm getting old because I've covered so many campaigns, but in the 2015 campaign, that was a major point of that campaign. The Trudeau Liberals were making big promises about infrastructure now, not in 8 years like Tom Mulcair was going to do, but now.
That was the reason for running a deficit.
Correct. And where are the projects? We're still
today
in
the
this huge
Prime Minister
deficit.
actually laid some blame for that on the provinces, which we will discuss after this break that we have to take. A very quick break with the Power Panel. But if you are watching on social media, we'll be continuing the discussion through the break. And please keep your questions for the Power Panel coming. Stay with us. We're back online for the commercial break. We're going to try to squeeze in a few questions here. So again, keep sending them our way. We just got one from Charlie Fulter asking on YouTube. Maybe I'll give this one to Tim. What is Scheer talking about when he says the wealthy are paying less in taxes? I thought Trudeau raised taxes on the rich.
The wealthy are
Are paying less in taxes. I think during
he's
question
talking,
period.
I think he's talking about the uber wealthy, the so-called 1% over a threshold of, I think in Canada it's over $250,000, and that's a direct attack, or a direct attack in rhetoric on Bill Morneau, on the Prime Minister himself. You will remember when the Liberal government tried to change the personal corporation tax structure. There was a lot of uprising, particularly in the Liberal caucus, around all of this. Well, things didn't change for those who had certain types of trusts. Trusts like Andrew Scheer argues Bill Morneau and Justin Trudeau possess. So that's part and parcel of reminding people that Justin Trudeau, in the eyes of the Conservatives, is this rich guy. He has other rich guys around him. They're not changing their circumstances. Why would you expect him to be of help to you?
Chris, Gabby Duga on YouTube asks, what should Prime Minister Trudeau focus on policy in the next 9 months before the federal elections in October?
Two of them. Use the federal budget to show how you're going to improve those middle-class Canadians' lives beyond what you say you've already done. Really, really important. Two, he has to show that the kinds of difficulties they're having around trade with the United States, around China right now, around even what's going to happen in the aftermath of Brexit, whenever England or the Brits can figure out what the exit strategy will be, because that will have an impact on our exports, and that's a big job generator here. And something that Kathleen mentioned earlier, we don't talk a lot about it anymore, but manufacturing strategy, innovation, making the investments in that economy of the future is not just car manufacturers. It is the kinds of cars that now will drive themselves. It's in about artificial intelligence. This is a real growth area that we haven't heard enough about, in my own opinion.
Interestingly, on that too, I was thinking this morning, Donald Trump tweeted out a tweet like, these tariffs, the steel tariffs, have been such a huge win for the U.S. He literally was like,
more people working than ever
tariffs
before.
on the dumping of steel have totally revived our steel industry. A big win in capitals for the U.S. So that doesn't sound like the exemptions that we were hoping to secure are anytime around the corner.
Yeah, it's a good point. He continues to sort of to portray that those people who are in those industries, who are in those Rust Belt states, jobs are coming back. Even though the numbers don't show it, he keeps repeating these themes, and there's a reason he's doing it, because people are obviously still buying it.
Okay, we are going to fade to black and be back on TV in a few seconds. Welcome back to this special Back to the Hill edition of Power and Politics. I'm Vassy Kapelos, and I'm here with the Power panel, Kathleen Monk, Tim Powers, Amanda Alvaro, and Chris Hall. We're taking your questions about MP's return to the House of Commons in this election year. You can submit those questions on Twitter. Our handle is @PNPCBC, on the CBC Politics Facebook page, or on the CBC News YouTube page. And I'll pick one up from Twitter, one of my Twitter on my Twitter account. My gosh, I'm already losing train of thought, and we're only in hour one. Amanda, what about
You've only got 4 hours to go.
4 hours to go, no worries. Yeah. What about the topic of disabled Canadians and the fixed income population that are now forced paying out of pocket for healthcare costs and medication? So I think there's two topics that are addressed there. I know that there's the Accessibility Act, which is currently, I think, in the House. It's in the legislative process. We don't know for sure if it'll pass. But then also pharmacare, which is I know an issue for the NDP and one that the Liberal government is currently considering, right?
Yeah, I think pharmacare could be one of the biggest issues that we talk about heading into and during the next election, being considered right now, exactly, and whether or not that shows up in the platforms, how it shows up, I think is key, really important, something that a lot of Canadians want to hear more about, something that we talked about in the last Ontario election, so I would expect that will percolate up. In terms of the Accessibility Act, I'm actually not sure where it is in the legislative process, so I don't know that I could give a good answer on that one.
It's that second reading, 81.
In the House? In the House?
Senate. Sorry.
Oh, it's in the Senate. Okay,
Yeah.
It's in the Senate. Sorry, yeah. Okay, let's move to another one. This is maybe my favorite question. Gordon Boulevant on Facebook asks, and I'll throw this one to you, Kathleen. Anyone know what they, politicians or parties, consider middle class? A relevant election question.
Everybody until you're not.
I did a whole workshop on this in 2014.
Great. What's the answer?
Actually, the answer is that there is none. I mean, economists will use various quintiles, but the thing is, actually, as a communication strategist, as a political strategist, the great thing about the middle class is everyone considers themselves the middle class. So people like Tim over here consider themselves
I always
the middle
get
class,
picked on in this question.
even though he may be much, much higher than that.
He drinks special kinds of beer.
Yeah,
Very
and
special
people
kind.
who are much lower than the middle class also aspire. It's an aspirational thing. They aspire to be in the middle class. So it's actually a really inclusive term. I mean, you can track communication language through the different parties. Our party used to use the working class, working Canadians, a more inclusive
Rachel Notley
way.
does in Alberta a lot.
Yeah, and that's because hardworking Canadians. We used to use, en français, Madame, Monsieur, tout le monde, right? Like the average porch goer, that's what Mr. Ford does actually in Ontario, Mr. and Mrs. Front Porch, right? So you want to have something that's inclusive, but there is an actual official definition of what is the middle class based on quintiles, but it's actually the mean salary, and correct me if I'm wrong on Twitter, but it's around $50,000 in Canada. So that is the mean average salary. So that would actually be what the salary
For
would
politicians, it's a state of mind because everybody wants to be considered the middle class. They want to live in a good neighborhood. They want to have a car. They want their kids to go to the best possible schools. Those tend to be in some of the suburban areas or wealthy neighborhoods of cities and towns. So, they all play on this idea, Vassy, and it works really well because it's hard to fact check.
Well, and you saw Andrew Scheer yesterday, and if you watched it, his speech to his caucus, talking about growing up with a hard-working family, which is another phrase to describe it. I didn't grow up with a trust fund. And again, that will be a theme the Conservatives push very hard because they want everybody, as Kathleen said, it's aspirational, but it crosses so many voting pools. That's what makes it a powerful term. So that's why you're going to hear a lot about it.
Amanda, you want to weigh in before I move to another question?
Well, I think the Liberals sort of owned that language in the 2015 election, and you can see in the first day that Parliament has resumed, you can see the language still emerging again. So they're certainly not abandoning it heading into the next election. They've sort of been the party that I think has been most connected to what they describe as the values of the middle class. It brought them, in many regards, the last election result. Can they tap into that particular sentiment? Can they tap into that feeling that people are part of the middle class, and for those who are struggling in some cases or aspiring in other cases to join it? If they are, we're also talking about the biggest pool of voters, which is something that we haven't said. We're talking about the largest swath of Canadians, and how do you attract those Canadians to your value proposition?
Chris, Donna Peeling on Facebook asked, do you really think there will ever be a pipeline? Just a $4.5 billion question.
I assume she means TMX.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
look,
maybe,
the
I mean, it
consultations
should be
are
asking
underway with the Indigenous groups that are affected to have real meaningful dialogue. The government owns it. There are already First Nations in particular along the route who are interested in buying. Other First Nations or Indigenous organizations have also expressed an interest in being involved in an ownership stake. Do I think it will be built? I do. I'm just not sure when. For Rachel Notley, it should start before her next election campaign, which is in March and April.
Shovels
it won't,
in the
but I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't already started by the time we go into the polls federally in September and October.
And I should mention that we have Natural Resources Minister Amarjeet Sohi on, I believe, in the 4 o'clock hour, so we'll be asking him lots of those questions for sure. Amanda, David Anthony Longpre, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing it, on Facebook asks, do you think the Phoenix payroll will come up again in the election? It's still a giant mess, no?
I don't think it'll be a big election issue. I think, could it emerge at some point between now and the next election? Yes, probably, because we tend to find that those issues percolate their way up when it's convenient particularly for opposition parties. But I wouldn't say that it's going to be a central issue, no.
It could be an issue, though, here in this region of Eastern Ontario, given the sheer volume of public servants that are here. And if there are some close races in this region, it could be very detrimental to the government if there hasn't continued to be improvement around it. So, and that could mean a few seats. If this election ends up being close because of weird forces that are out there, that could be thus making it a bigger issue than we think it is.
I would just say there's a lot of Liberal seats in the NCR and the National Capital Regions, the Gatineau and Ottawa region, and we're hitting 3 years, right? Yeah. The anniversary of Phoenix is in a couple of weeks, and it's been 3 years. You look at the news coverage, it was just about 35 days of the shutdown and people public servants not being paid in the U.S. We haven't actually had the same kind of outroar here in Canada, but it is unbelievable. We have the best public service in the world as ranked internationally, and yet many of them are still not being paid properly.
I'm surprised the NDP in particular, but any of the opposition parties, the Green Party as well, haven't made it into, say, a broader question of the ability of the government to manage its own operations. I think we'll hear more of that because, frankly, when we do the stories about Phoenix, there's not a lot of sympathy from people for public sector workers not getting paid the appropriate amounts. It should be an issue. Your work, you should be paid what you're entitled to be paid. But I would see it being broadened out into a question of overall competence and management.
You mentioned the Greens. Kathleen, I'll ask you this. Devin DeMarco on YouTube asks, how big of an impact can the Greens have in the 2019 election, given some gains by provincial Green parties?
Yeah, I think we've seen obviously them surging in PEI and obviously in some other Atlantic provinces. They've always had a good ground game on the Vancouver Island and in that parts of BC. So certainly I think they're one to watch, but specifically because of the fact that they don't fully run 338 campaigns across the country. Now they may have candidates. They normally don't actually reach the 338 in terms of candidate number, but they don't run full campaigns like other parties do. And that way they can actually concentrate the resources, which we've seen in previous years where they've concentrated on Vancouver Island or Guelph here in Ontario or actually eastward.
Amanda, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't disagree with Kathleen. I think that there's room, especially in this election, when we see the NDP off to what appears to be a troublesome start. Does it make room for other parties to develop and really promote a particular narrative that otherwise wouldn't get a lot of ink? It may. We'll see. But generally speaking, what ends up happening is that our three major parties take up the lion's share of both all of the media interests as well as all of the events. They certainly have all of the fundraising dollars. And that gives way to less time spent and less time really being seen some of the other more fringe is the wrong word, but parties that have fewer seats. It doesn't mean that it can't happen. It just means that the likelihood of them, really having a massive surge, I think is probably very, very nil at this point.
We would see more of them if there was some kind of electoral reform. Just saying.
But that went well, didn't it? That
Not
went
happening in BC.
Broken
Okay,
promise.
we have just, I think, about a minute and a half left, so I want to end on this question, which I think is a great one. Keel Kodama on Facebook asks, how are the parties going to appeal to the millennial vote? affordable housing, eco-justice, job security, and precarious work. Tim, I'll start with you.
I think it's all going to be in that bucket of affordability. A large measure of it will be housing, but also about the sharing economy and making it more tangible and real. And I think you will also see messengers of a similar age and vintage from all parties trying to say, hey, we're the most connected to you. You need to listen to us. So we'll see if it works.
There are some direct consumer issues, things like Wi-Fi and internet fees and consumer fees. But I also want to point out that Teen Vogue in the States just recently wrote a whole piece on a general strike. This younger generation is more inclined towards unionism and social progressivism than previous generations. And so you actually might see a greater appeal with things like work-life balance, with having, in terms of jobs and job security, to having pension security in the future. So there's different ways to cut this millennial demographic, and it's not just thinking the usual, like, housing is going to be the only issue that actually appeals to them.
Chris, final word. I have about 15 seconds.
On this,
You've got a millennial.
I worry about job churn, things like that the Prime Minister's told people to expect. I worry about retirement incomes for people. I think that the younger generation now, the young voters, really gets that things are not going to be the same for them as it was for their parents.
Okay, that wraps up our early Power Panel. Thank you very much to Amanda Alvaro, Tim Powers, Kathleen Monk, and Chris Hall. And thank you to everyone who sent in your questions. They were awesome. There is a lot more ahead, though, on this special extended edition of Power in Politics. What effect will the departure of John McCallum have on Canada's relationship with China? Did the cases of Michael Kovrig, Michael Spavor, and Robert Schellenberg just get a whole lot more complicated? We'll explore that over the next hour. Stay with us.